Hello, world. Welcome to the Speed Strength Show. I'm Braden.
I'm Tommy. And do you make your bed?
Ooh, sometimes when it gets out of control, I do.
I wasn't sure if you were someone who like makes their bed or doesn't make their bed. If you think it's worth it.
I'll say like 90. If if you if you say every morning is an opportunity to make your bed, I'll say 75% of the time it's not worth it.
I never make my bed. I don't think it's ever worth it.
Does the fitted sheet not come off for you?
Uh,
No.
explain. What's a fitted sheet? I'm gonna
That's
sound like an
the
idiot.
I, maybe you call it something different, but it's the thing that has like it has like the elastics around the edge and it conforms to the mattress.
Oh yeah, the thing that the piece of material you wrap around the mattress.
Yeah.
Uh, no, I've never had that happen.
Oh, okay. I have that happen. Do you? Okay, so here's another question then. Do
Oh,
you?
you're answering my question with a question.
Well, when you, because I think it depends upon this.
Okay.
Do you sleep? Like, are you an active sleeper or like, do you just, are you like sleeping in a coffin basically?
Well, I don't know because I'm asleep, but I've been told I'm an
Okay.
active sleeper. I
So,
like move
okay.
around a lot.
Move around a lot. Okay. I also move around a lot. So for me in the morning, like the sheets could be anywhere. Like I could be pulling the fitted sheet off of like I have to fix the fitted sheet probably every like 4 or 5 days because I just pull it down.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, maybe that would factor. I just never make my bed because I figure it's not worth it. Like, I wake up, I'm like, the sheets are kind of messy. No one's gonna see it anyway, and then 16 hours later, I'm gonna be there sleeping again, and it's all gonna get ruined.
Yeah.
So it's a waste of time, I think.
And that's my exact logic. And like honestly, when I do make the bed, I fix the fitted sheet and then I put the blankets on. But I don't really care if they're straight. Like as long as they're on, that's fine. It's and even when I was younger, I would only make the bed if like the sheets were so messed up that I knew if I got into bed later, I would have to do some arranging to like actually sort them out. That's the only time it would happen. But yeah, like if they're a little bit messed up, like that's honestly perfect because that's exactly what I need them to be.
Yeah, I'm just it, it just interests me people that make their bed, and I know there's some people that's like, oh, it's the first thing I do. Like I wake up in the morning, and then like they start their day by making the bed, and then it's like
It's like a ritual.
yeah, it's almost like a ritual, and it's a way to like I don't know, have this organization or whatever in your life where it's like, yeah, now I'm ready for the day. But I just to me, it doesn't serve a purpose
Oh, yeah, I agree.
because you're just gonna mess it up later to go back to bed.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And like I feel the same thing about about other stuff, honestly. Like if there's clothes like uh if you wear a sweater, I think this is more acceptable. Sweater or like jeans are things that people commonly rewear. Um, I mean, I'll rewear a t-shirt if I wore it for like the second half of the day and I didn't work out or whatever. Like I'll rewear the t-shirt the next day. If I'm gonna rewear clothes, like I'm not gonna hang them up. I'll just put them on a chair or just put them on the floor or something because like I'm gonna use it again really soon. I just don't need it right now. I don't need it to be folded or whatever.
Yeah, I actually do hang the stuff back up.
Now that's interesting.
I don't know why.
That seems like the exact same thing as the bed thing to me.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know. I mean now the closet's very accessible.
Hmm.
So it is easy and I don't have a chair in my room. So my
Hmm.
two options with where my clothes are to either hang it back up or leave it on the floor.
Yeah,
I'm not going to leave it on the floor. And
I
the
leave it
bed's
on.
already a mess. So I'm not
I
going to
leave it
put
on
it
the
in the
floor.
bed.
I leave
So
mine on the floor most of the time. But I guess the other thing too is the bed, with the bed, if you don't make your bed, the sheets aren't on the ground. If you put stuff on the ground, then it's taking up space, but the bed is going to take up the same amount of space regardless.
Yeah, whether the sheets are made
Yeah.
or not.
Hmm.
So yeah, it is. I do hang up my clothes.
Hmm.
With
enough.
like you said, like if I mean, the lockdowns have been bad. I typically like don't wear a shirt at home if I don't need to. I figure why make laundry? It's
100%.
a waste of
100%.
time. Just more things to wash, more water, more soap to use.
Yeah.
But like, if I have to run outside and check the mail or do something like that, then be like, oh, I got to go outside with a shirt on. So I'll like take a shirt off the hanger, put it on, run outside, put the garbage out, check the mail, and then I'll come back inside and I'll just take the shirt off and put it back in the hanger.
Yeah.
Because like I only needed the shirt to go outside. And then I'm like, I'm not going to dirty this shirt for no reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Absolutely. No, that makes sense. Okay. One more. This is like the same thing, but just one more scenario.
people are finding out how messy I am.
So when me, like right now, Brown and I are living with my parents and like my brother's home now. So
Yeah.
a lot of people in the house. So I do my dishes right away. Like I cook breakfast. We had the conversation about this. I do my dishes before I eat breakfast.
Yeah. I don't get it.
It's fine.
That
I promise you it's fine. But when it was just us living together, and especially like if she was out and I made breakfast and then I know I'm going to be making lunch and I might make dinner before she's home. Like I don't need to clean the pan in between, really. Like I might rinse it. I might rinse the plate, but I'll probably just reuse the plate. I'll reuse the pan without washing either of them because it depends a little bit what you're eating and how messy that was. But I mean, like, why make dishes is my thought process there.
I'm normally pretty good with cleaning up my dishes. The one thing I do that I probably should get out of the habit of doing is like, let's say in the morning I make like eggs and oatmeal or something, right? And so I've used a cutting board and a knife to chop up the veggies. I've used the pan to fry the veggies and the eggs. And then I have the oatmeal on the pot or whatever. And then I put them all on the one side of the sink because I'm like, these are dirty. I need to wash them at some point. And then I'm really bad for, let's say, like 2 or 3 hours later. Then I come back to make lunch. And then I go, what can I make for lunch that doesn't involve any of the things that I just dirtied? So that way I don't have to do dishes again, but I can still have lunch. And then usually what happens is by the time dinner rolls around, I have like a lot of dishes that I have to do. And now I am wondering, as I'm saying this out loud, if I'm better off to do the dishes more frequently in smaller bouts rather than just do one big dishwashing. Cause I've basically tried to, I use the pan, I use the pot, better make a sandwich for lunch, and then I'll use other things and dirty those. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like it's a short-term gain because it gets me to making lunch faster, but I don't know if in the long run, if I might not be picking the best strategy here.
I mean, if it's affecting what you're eating, then I think for that reason, it's probably not worth it. But I am of the opinion that I think most of the time, if you're cleaning, it's more time effective to do a lot of cleaning once than a little bit of cleaning many times. This might not be the case with like cooking and like dishes and stuff because the longer it sits, the more like stuck the pieces of food are.
I always soak
the
things.
Dishes.
That's a big help.
Okay, well then, then you're probably fine, honestly. Assuming like if you don't want to eat a sandwich, but that's the only thing you can eat because of the dishes, then
It's not the only thing, but it restricts my choices. Where if I'm going to make whatever, but I need the pan. I'd rather make it in that pan. That pan's dirty. Okay, I'll make something different that doesn't need the pan because I don't feel like washing it right now.
Yeah. I mean, so for that reason, then maybe, but I think you're fine. Yeah, if you do the dishes at the end of the day, that's fine. If you're leaving dishes for multiple days, that's questionable.
Never. Most dishes get left by my sink for 4 or 5 hours at most.
Wow. Not even till the next morning, eh?
No, the only time I'll leave them for the next morning is if I made something at like 10 o'clock at night and then I made food, I eat it, and then I go to bed right after.
Yeah.
And I go, I'll deal with this. Well, what I'm probably doing is I'm washing them with the breakfast dishes. Then I make
Yeah.
whatever for breakfast, and then I've piled up all those dishes and I go, okay, time to wash them all.
Yeah. Fair
So
enough. Fair enough.
now people know how I live.
um, well, this is just your home life. I guess people also kind of know a little bit about your gym life, our gym lives.
Which is
I
also at home.
Well, right now it's at
Yeah.
home. Yeah, that's true. Um, I've known that your gym life lives on one leg, like basically forever.
Or pseudo one leg.
Pseudo one leg. That's a good point. That's a good point. That's a good point. 70% on one leg.
Correct.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I don't really know how to get into this one, honestly. Like we're talking unilateral versus bilateral again.
Part 3.
Part
There.
3.
Done.
The best
Part 3.
the
Let's
best
go.
part. Hopefully the best part. Um, yeah, we're talking like we've brought up a lot of, I guess, opinions about these things back and forth. We haven't chosen one over the other because you shouldn't do that.
We're just presenting, putting stuff
Yeah,
out there.
yeah, yeah. And then we've had some thoughts about how these things should be used. I guess like they're all tools, but how these things should be used. This, I guess, of the series that we've done is the most diverse topic, I would say.
Yeah, and arguably the topic with, I don't want to say the least information, but
I'm comfortable
definitely.
saying that.
Sorry?
I'm comfortable saying that.
Yeah, like the research was like not helpful at
Yeah.
all. It was subpar at best.
Yeah. Yeah.
Compared to some of the other stuff where there's a lot of research, a lot of really good research,
Plus, those
conclusive
were
research.
conclusive research, and I think those were more finite topics, I would say as well.
Yeah, you're definitely right. There's a lot of avenues this can take.
Like if you're talking unilateral versus bilateral exercise, that's literally every exercise ever.
And what could be and what could be created. And
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. So, but yeah, I mean, we'll see what interesting ideas. Like, you have some ideas.
I have a couple of ideas. Yeah,
Okay.
there's a few things that kind of sparked a thought or two as we were exploring this and as we've like kind of talked about it out loud and gone back and forth on some points. And one of the things that I've kind of come up with or thought is that is double leg or double arm movements that we do in training more specific to sporting demands than stuff that's on the unilateral side? And does it change how you potentially progress and use some of these exercises? And I know like the Franz Bosch people and the functional people are probably going to lose their minds if they hear that. They go, there's no way double leg could be more specific than single leg, or double arm is more specific than single arm. But as we've started to explore what you can take away from the double leg and what you can take away from single leg or double arm versus single arm, I do start to wonder if maybe we have to reverse that thinking, and is using bilateral movements at times of the year where we want to be more specific, is that maybe the better strategy to use? And the reason for that is because of, I think, the global demand it puts on the body and the ability to create more velocity in the movement would be the primary reason behind why I'm thinking that. So, and in the past I've done that. I've moved from, a double leg jump, for example, to a single leg jump as the season progresses because I want it to be more specific. And I'm starting to think back and go, maybe that wasn't the best move, because now if it's on one leg or one arm, the movement's a little bit slower. It creates a larger window to apply force. It's more of that peripheral loading kind of force biased type movement compared to a speed movement.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was one of the initial thoughts that I had on that, and probably the biggest one.
Yeah, so I think I think it does make sense. I like it always depends. Absolutely, it always depends. Um that's kind of like, as we were digging into this stuff, that was one of the thoughts that I had, that I don't know, even if you're talking about, like, if you're talking about the speed of the movements, if you're talking about the um yeah, I mean, I'm the speed of the movements, I guess, is the main thing. Um then I think it makes a lot of sense. Like, you can match those up pretty well, or at least a lot closer. Um, and if you look at certain sports or certain positions in sports, like we talked about volleyball before, where you're doing a lot of stuff on two legs, you spend a lot of time in a squat position, um, or like a lineman in football, or like, you know, like a rugby player and stuff like that. You spend a lot of time on two legs, and even for me, I think regardless of the sport, not regardless of the sport, but like, it's less dependent upon the sport. The important things that you're doing in a sport happen on two legs more often as well. Um, like, I would say in most sports, jumping happens off of 2 feet. I think tackling happens off of 2 feet. Blocking happens off of 2 feet. Really aggressive change of direction happens on 2 feet. Um, so from that perspective, like, I think that bilateral work can be more specific to that stuff as well. And especially if we're talking weight room stuff, because like, the other parts of sport are running, and you're not going to run in the weight room, you know? But yeah, in terms of the speed that you can use in a finite movement anyway, I would agree for sure that, yeah, two leg movement is going to be more specific to the speed and the amount of force maybe needed to do different movements and stuff.
Yeah, and part of this too comes from, this goes like way back when we talked about specificity. I don't even remember what episode that was because it was that long ago. Um, but like, what makes something specific? And to me, something looking like it is specific is probably the worst form of specificity.
Mm.
Just because it looks like something doesn't mean it's going to transfer, doesn't mean it's going to, benefit what someone's doing. So to me, when we're looking at can we make something specific, you have to look at the muscles being used, the action or the plane of movement that you're in, the muscle tension, the velocity of the movement, and what type of contraction are you using. And to me, those things can be achieved with double leg as well, or double arm. It doesn't have to be, because none of that factors in what does the movement look like. It's all at sort of a physiological or biomechanical level, because th- there's no perfect training for sport. The best way to train for your sport is to do your sport. Anything else that we're doing, you're trying to build these underlying qualities, and you have to try to transfer them as best as possible. So to me, if those are the factors that really play a role in specificity, I can probably achieve those things better with a double arm or double leg movement, because I'm going to be able to still use the muscles that are used, still be in the same plane, still use the same contraction type, but I'm going to be able to get more velocity out of that movement. And then I'm going to be able to create more similar muscle tension and muscle action because the velocity is closer to what it would be in the field of sport. So that's kind of my thought around that, because I think classically, we look at plyos or we look at other things like that. We move from double leg to single leg, thinking that that's getting more specific. And this conversation is starting to get me to think that maybe it could be the other way around.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think based off of that breakdown, I think you're right. I think we do move from double leg to single leg because it looks more specific, but also because it's harder. And I think that that's maybe a big reason to it. Like, we see, uh, like, when you are first learning about strength and conditioning and stuff, and you learn about progressing a movement, and changing the base of support is one of the things that you can change to make it more challenging, right? Um, but I think too, it matters. What we talked about in the, I can't remember if it was the first or second part of this, but do you want a global effect or do you want a local effect? And if you're talking about like a heavily weighted movement, like a split squat versus a squat or something, and we, um, I mean, depending on the person, agreed that the split squat is going to have a potentially stronger local effect, and the squat's going to have a potentially stronger global effect. Um, if you're talking about affecting, to me, if something looks like the movement and you're trying to achieve like similar positions and things like that, which not that you shouldn't try to achieve similar positions, but I think um, that's probably a big part of the argument for why you should split squat instead of squat, because split squatting looks closer to running than squatting does. Maybe not. To me, trying to achieve that position is almost going after more of that global effect kind of a thing, where you've got this leg here, and you're stabilizing in this kind of a way. You've got that, split pelvis kind of a position. You've got your cross body slings working in a specific kind of a way. Um, but if you want each of the individual muscles and have that local effect where, like the gastroc is going to contract at this velocity, this force, the hamstrings are going to contract at this velocity and this force, and all those sorts of things, then you definitely have a lot more control and variability and like ability to decide like how you want these things to happen through a bilateral movement, because it's easier and because you can do it faster. You don't have to do it faster, but you have the option to do it very fast or very slow or whatever, versus with a unilateral movement, you maybe don't have very many options at all, because like you can't go super fast because it's hard and body weight is heavy, and you maybe can't go super slow meaningfully, because to go really slow on one leg is like, that takes a lot of control, and you can't necessarily load that up either, you know.
And the other reason I thought about the unilateral to bilateral maybe being the better way to move from more general to specific times of the year is exactly what you brought up as well with, one leg is harder. Well, if I'm in the middle of a competitive season, I'm going into the weight room and I'm trying to get a few things done and then I'm getting out. I'm not trying to overload the athletes with fatigue. I'm not trying to do too much. So yeah, let's go in. Let's do 3 or 4 exercises. They're bilateral. We move fast. We get a global effect. Done. Let's get out. I don't want to have a ton of soreness. I don't want them to do, a number of sets and then they have to do both legs or both arms. And then we're dragging out like sessions in the weight room. Because that was one of the other things we brought up. I think it was part 2, the last one, where it's a little bit more time efficient to do the bilateral stuff compared to the unilateral. And so that was my other thought behind that moving from more general to specific with the bilateral movements, is that it better fits the global outcomes we're looking for and the time and fatigue factors that we're looking to address as well. I think that you can better do that with a bilateral movement compared to a unilateral movement. Because if you're getting more local effect, you're likely to get more fatigue and more load in that sense.
And not to mention too, with like requiring to like control the movement more, like more time under tension is going to be more fatigue, and you're going to need to spend a lot more time in an eccentric action as well, I think, in most situations. um and I mean, I also brought up like one of the spots that the research was a little bit useful for me was that bilateral exercise, the adaptations last longer for whatever reason. I don't know why, but
Yeah,
they
I
last
completely
longer. So
forgot about
like
that.
that's a perfect, like, to use that, in your last few blocks before your competitive season. During competitive season, you don't need to do that much stuff to maintain. You do get the global effect, so you don't need to do as many exercises. You don't need to do both sides. Um, Yeah, it makes, and you have all the options about with speed and things like that. Um, and then like to me, it also makes a lot of sense to use the unilateral stuff like in your first couple blocks of the off season, um, because you don't need a lot of load to get good stimulus out of it. You can heal up, you can move slowly and control and develop all those stabilizers and correct some imbalances and all those sorts of things, and then while still developing strength, and potentially they're better for developing strength depending on the person, so you got lots of options that way as well. So I mean, I think it does make a lot of sense to kind of flip what we think about.
Yeah, and I mean to throw a third kind of element into it, because what you've just brought up, doing the true single leg stuff at the start. If you think like the start of an off season,
Mm-hmm.
because like you said, you can, what's it called? Um, like it's less load. You need body weight. You don't necessarily need to have a whole bunch of external weight. And so it's a good thing to kind of get people back into the weight room, back moving around. We've talked before too about unilateral being a little bit better for dealing with imbalances. So you can address all that stuff earlier in the off season and say more your general prep. And then when you brought up the idea from Cal Dietz about like loading a rear foot elevated split squat, but holding onto the bar and having extra stability, you're almost trying to blend the best of both worlds, right? You're trying to get the load of the bilateral movement and the stability of a bilateral movement combined with the overload and the adaptation effect on one leg. So if you expand this idea from single leg to double leg over the course of a whole season, from off season to preseason competitive phase, do you move from unilateral, true unilateral work early on? And then when you really want to start loading in the off season, do you move to pseudo unilateral stuff? And then as you get into the competitive season, preseason, you have to put a premium on movement speed. Is that when you get into the bilateral movement? So do you move from single leg or true unilateral, pseudo unilateral to bilateral? And is that maybe the the continuum that you follow during the season? I've never done that before. I'd be curious to try it if I had the facilities and the means to do that within reason.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could make a lot of sense. Like another benefit, depending on who you're dealing with, um, it's nice doing the true unilateral stuff. Like you don't necessarily need to be like at a gym to do that stuff and to get an effect from that stuff too. So if you want to like give whoever like your players like you can head out for a month. Like that's just here's some stuff that you can do at home, and that'll be good. Like it's a small thing, but that's like it's a nice little cherry on top, I guess. But I do think that it makes a lot of sense to do it in that way. Um, and you through doing like the big time strength work on one leg or like pseudo one leg, you are really working all of those stabilizers as well. Doing them, and like you can do an eccentric, concentric kind of format, or like he also talks about doing like an isometric single leg RDL as being like the best true maximal strength exercise in his opinion anyway. Um, so and you can do it isometrically um, and get a big benefit there. Not as much of the global, but more of the local effect, I think.
But in
Um,
those times in the off season where you have more time, you have no
that's true.
demands of competition, that's to me ideally where you would want to look for that localized overload.
Yeah, and you can afford to have tons of fatigue, and you don't need to be worried about being ready for competition or for practice or whatever. Um, and I think it honestly could work that way, like not just for strength work, is kind of like what we're talking about, where you're spending a lot more time in like strength stuff at the beginning of the season, and then it's going to transition more into maintenance, which you're going to want to use bilateral stuff as we just said because it doesn't dissipate as quickly, and You don't need as much time to do it, as many sets to do it, as and you get more bang for your buck in terms of like how you're affecting the entire body. um but even I think doing that with with power work and plyo work and stuff too, like I think it makes some sense, because you still need to have control over those movements, and to like slow them down a little bit and really get a hang of those movements, by doing them on one leg or pseudo one leg, whatever. It makes sense, and that's going to be a little bit more towards the strength side of the speed strength continuum. um, Plus you're getting all the benefits of like, or you're getting more like torso control in space, and having to use those stabilizers in more of like a ballistic kind of a way too, which like you're going to need. um, and then as you get closer to competition, yeah, like you can use all of those things you've developed and speed them up, and all of a sudden like you might have just so much more output, because through like mastering the single leg stuff, you might just have so much more control over these movements that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And that, like I said, that was kind of the big takeaway I took from this conversation was, like as you said, I do a lot of stuff on one leg or one arm. I'm a big fan of unilateral or pseudo unilateral based training, but this is getting me to rethink maybe where the bilateral movements come into play. And yeah, kind of rethinking that continuum, because I think we tend to think bilateral to unilateral, because like you said, it's a progression of, call it quote unquote easier to more challenging.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking we probably want that flipped, because we don't want to be doing a whole bunch of challenging, difficult, fatiguing work in the middle of a competitive season.
I mean, that's a really good point. Like,
So
yeah,
that was the big idea I had, was that unilateral to pseudo unilateral to bilateral within whatever periodization scheme or planning that you're using.
yeah. No, that it's kind of funny to think about it now, actually, because obviously going through the off season, you do kind of, you want to, as the athletes get better, you want to challenge them as they get stronger, more coordinated, whatever, you want to challenge them. um but it's also kind of like, if you're going to introduce a new exercise, something that these people have never done before, and like weightlifting stuff, if you're going to introduce it, you're going to introduce it at the beginning, because it takes a long time to learn,
Yeah.
you know and so if you know that this thing is going to take some time to learn, they're not going to necessarily get the output of it right away. Like, why would you introduce it like right before the season starts?
And that's a great point. If you're looking to get the output on something, output being power output, velocity, whatever, like you said, if they're trying to figure out how to do the movement, you're not going to get that.
Yeah.
So that's also a great point, that, yeah, you're going to be able to jump faster off of 2 feet than you are doing a new novel single leg thing.
Hmm.
And maybe you're not getting the output. I mean, that's a great point.
And you'll be able to pick up the bilateral movement so much faster anyway. Like, so if you, I guess in my opinion, if you wanted to, for whatever reason, stray away from one completely, which I don't think you should ever stray away from one of them completely, you probably should stray away from the bilateral, because when you come back to it, it'll be like, it probably won't be that much different, you know?
And like you said, it maybe only takes them one session to figure out, oh yeah, this is how fast I can move or how powerful I can be with this. And they're confident to put that intent into the movement, compared to with a single leg or single arm thing where they're maybe a little bit cautious and they're trying to figure out how to balance themselves and do this and do that. That type of intent and that type of output better suits itself for much earlier in the off season rather than in the middle of a competitive phase,
Mm-hmm.
where you want people just to be just moving
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
not thinking, just intent, get the job done,
Yeah.
and be
Yeah.
direct
It's
with it.
just because, I mean, because at that point, it's all like all the thinking should be about the sport and like your game planning and your technique and all those kinds of things. So all the physical stuff should just be as close to pure ability as possible, I think. So yeah, that's that's cool. I mean, yeah, we talked that out in a pretty good way. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and like I said, one of the things I like about it is that you could fit it into whatever periodization or planning scheme you're
Hmm.
using. So it's not like this only works in a block method or the traditional or whatever method anyone out there is using. However you program and plan stuff, that that's that spectrum of moving from true unilateral into bilateral as you get closer and closer to competition can be worked into any system that somebody already has set up.
Yeah, and there's still going to be like in those early phases, lots of benefit to using bilateral stuff, and then those late phases, lots of benefit to using unilateral stuff. Like none of it should ever completely go away.
Just
But yeah,
where's the primary focus,
hmm,
and
yeah,
that would
absolutely.
shift.
Um, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So, man, I talked about this a little bit on the last one. Um, so in my head, it makes sense. Like if you're going after strength work, however you can produce the most amount of force is how you should do strength work.
Because that is strength.
Exactly. Um, if it makes sense for your sport to be stronger on two legs than on one leg, then you should probably try to train your way in that direction. If it makes sense for your sport to be the other way, then you should try to train in that direction. Um, like I was just saying, all of the important stuff like jumping, tackling, blocking, like all of, I mean, obviously speed is very, very important. I'm not going to deny that, but um, I guess, I don't know, like the more of the skill stuff that you have to do in sport, I think takes place on two legs, and is more like explosive. And you kind of like, you have to move. It's not just moving fast, like it's also moving load a lot of the time as well.
Yeah, and the other element with speed and sports outside of like closed individual sports,
Yes, absolutely.
right? Is speed is incorporated with change of direction. And we've already talked about a lot of times if you're aggressively changing direction, you end up with 2 feet on the ground at the same time
Hmm.
before you have to move. So it's different than like sprinting on an open track. We are
Yes.
constantly moving from one leg to the other. If I'm sprinting down a basketball court or a football field, at some point I slow down, I stop, I change direction, I planted 2 feet on the ground.
Yeah.
So yeah, that uh, I agree with you on that point that, you know, we tend to think of speed solely as a unilateral thing, but that's because we probably just immediately envision somebody running down a track. But
Yeah.
that's only speed in track and field. That's not
Yeah.
speed necessarily in football or basketball or hockey. Or hockey, they never leave the ice for the most part. They move between one leg and two leg
Oh
positions when they're
yeah.
skating.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I think you're right that we overthink the unilateral equals speed
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
other way around, however you want to look at it.
Yeah. So in my head, the breakdown strength, whatever you're good at, you should do that. Power stuff, like again, this still, I talked about it last time. It's still not a fully formed idea. A lot of the two leg stuff you do in sport to me seems like it's power based. You're moving yourself against gravity, or you're moving another human, or stuff like that. That stuff's all on two legs, and it's fast, it's explosive, but you're also moving load. And then true speed stuff is like you're just running. Um, and that to me, like that's on one leg. So in my head, it makes a little bit of sense to do like your strength stuff, whatever you're good at, you do your strength stuff that way. Your power stuff, you do that on two legs, and your speed stuff, you do that on one leg. And I know that if you're just doing like a single leg, like broad jump, that's going to be slow. I know that for sure. So, and I don't think that's how speed should be.
And it'll be
Um,
much slower than if you did it off 2 feet.
yeah, exactly. But so I was at the track this morning,
Oh,
and I did. It was the last part of my warm up. I'm going to count it as like a little bit of potentiation. I did single leg continuous broad jumps.
oh, okay.
So it's not bounding. It's where you're going right left. This is right 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 right.
Oh, so it's a continuous hop.
Yeah yeah
Yeah.
yeah. But like distance. It's not like I'm not just bouncing off the ground. Like
Yeah,
I'm
you're
trying to.
trying to cover ground on every.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in my head, I didn't watch myself. Like I haven't seen a lot of people do this kind of stuff. Um, I imagine my contact time on the ground was longer than it would be in like if I was sprinting.
For sure.
But I think the speed at which my leg is cycling is faster than it would be for sprinting because I'm going same leg, same leg, same leg, same leg.
Yeah, you have to turn over the frequency of the leg turning over is going to have to be faster.
Yeah. So I think from that perspective and maybe the like stability across the body, the way you have to contract and relax that cross body chain might be faster. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's not a fully formed idea, but I think there's something there where if you can find a way to make single leg stuff fast, it makes sense to do speed stuff on single leg. And like I don't know if that stuff would be like, I mean, you have a lot more experience with this stuff than I do. Like, do you think a bilateral broad jump continuous would be faster than a unilateral broad jump continuous? I don't think it would be in terms of the cycling, but the contact time probably would be, and the distance covered probably would be.
Yeah, the contact time would be greater. I mean, you could argue that the contraction velocity of like loading and exploding off of 2 feet would be faster as well.
Yeah.
Um, I think you're definitely right. The cycling is going to be faster. But then what you'd have to look at is also to like it's the right word, like the amplitude of that movement.
Mm,
So are you shortening up the range
that's a good point.
or the size of the movement
Hmm.
to get that speed?
Yeah.
Right. So if somebody was like running full speed, the leg follows, call it a larger shape or a larger
Yep.
pattern.
Yep.
But then if I got somebody just to do ankle runs,
Yep.
they'd be stepping way faster,
Hmm.
but they're doing so because they're following a much smaller movement or smaller
Hmm.
shape that they're making. So that's where I would come at it from in that
Hmm.
perspective, where if somebody could still create, call it like a good shape or a good movement with that leg,
Hmm.
um, then yeah, there's definitely a coordinative element there
Hmm.
that I think would be beneficial. Because again, when I look at speed and I look at change of direction, I look at it from an intensity standpoint and a coordination standpoint.
Hmm.
And I think the continuous double leg jump would be better suited from a intensity standpoint.
Hmm.
But the single leg continuous hop that you're describing would be better from a coordinative standpoint
Mm.
in that sense. So to me, they would potentially address different things
Yeah.
in that regard.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's kind of how, yeah, it makes like, I mean, this was a thought that I had. As I've said many times, I don't think it should be one or the other for like any of these things, you know, like unilateral or bilateral for any part of training. Um, but yeah, it like anything else, I think there's benefits to both of them. They just do it in different ways. And it's kind of like, where do you want the effect to be? Um, and that sort of thing. Um,
Well, and that's the thing. You could use both those movements, for example,
mhm,
maybe in the same training block, but maybe you're using one more than the other, or
mhm,
doing a larger volume of one versus the other based on, Like if it was earlier, like late in the off season or earlier in the season, maybe you can do more of the single leg one. And then as we got closer to a competitive season, maybe you want to pull back on that single leg hop and do more of the continuous broad jump, for example.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So they're
for sure.
both still in there, but you're maybe just adjusting the volume or the role that each of those are playing based on the time of the year and what you're trying to get out of it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, it's interesting. Just an idea. You go ahead.
Yeah. Well, no. What I was going to say is I get what you're saying, right? Like with
Hmm.
the movement velocity in
Hmm.
terms of like, yeah, looking at it in two different perspectives.
Yeah.
Kind of what's the global. Well, and it almost goes back to the unilateral being local and bilateral being global, because I would argue that double leg jump gives you more global speed. Your
Oh,
takeoff
certainly.
velocity is probably higher.
Yeah.
But
Your body is moving faster. Yeah.
yeah, but then when you, like you said, when you do the single leg hop and you look at it just in that one leg that's cycling, there's
Hmm.
probably greater local action there. So
I
it
tell,
almost aligns perfectly with that
yeah. I
global and local impact.
I tell you, it certainly feels that way. um. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Um. I had a thought too. This is kind of like, I guess, the opposite of what I was just talking about, but um.
Exploring both sides of the fence, right?
Yeah. Um. With with speed work. So in again in my head, the only time in sport where you're ever really on one leg, like a lot of basketball players jump off of one foot, which is fine. Um, like I said, I don't think that happens that much in other sports. Um, but other than that, I think most of the stuff you do on one leg is just running. Like I don't think you do very much of anything else on one leg entirely anyway.
Yeah, because there's probably not enough stability.
Exactly. Like nothing that you need a meaningful amount of force for. Like anything you need a meaningful amount of force for, you're going to do it on two legs.
Like I might be running down the field with the ball in rugby
Hmm.
and I might get hit and I have one foot on the ground, but you would think the immediate reaction is to try to get the other foot back down on the ground as quick as you can to give you
100%.
more stability.
100%.
And if you're falling, what do? You stumble and you try to get the other foot
Yeah.
in a
Or your
place to
arm,
catch yourself or your arm.
as as
Exactly.
many limbs as possible on the ground.
Exactly. Yeah. And keep
Yeah.
yourself from falling. So I, yeah, I'm hard pressed to think of, unless, I mean, we talked about how messy it could be to look at the upper body. Like throwing obviously happens with one arm in most sports.
Yeah.
You throw a football, baseball, cricket ball, whatever with one hand. The only two-handed throw I can think of off the top of my head is in soccer,
Yeah. I think
where
rugby
you
has one too, but it's
oh
a
yeah,
little,
yeah, where they toss it
it's,
overhead to the
yeah.
madman who goes up on that human pyramid that they make.
Yeah. Or like, I mean, it's called a line out, but yeah. Um, or a long snap would be the only other one. But both of those are a little bit more, it's that's pseudo unilateral throwing. Those, I think.
Yeah. So
A
I don't
little
even
bit
want to
more
get
one
into
sided.
the the mess that could be upper body. But yeah, I'm having a hard time thinking about movement where you move from one leg to the other.
Yeah.
That
Like
isn't
you'll make smaller cuts for sure. Like you'll weave a little bit on one foot, but yeah. Anyway, so that's my thought. And then when you're running at full speed, like in track, like if you're talking about true track speed, you have momentum with you. So
yes.
there's not going to be a lot of side to side. There's not going to be a lot of need for stabilization in my head anyway. Obviously, you're much more of a track person, so
Well,
but
you don't have to stabilize for the outside environment. Just stay between your lines.
well, sorry, that's not, I don't mean like accounting for like other players and things like that. I mean, like if you want to run in a straight line, um, like if you're moving up and down in a pistol squat, for example,
Yeah.
and you're trying to control your body in that kind of a movement, in my head, a lot more stabilization is required because of the amount of time you need to be controlling that load, versus if you're sprinting, the amount of time that you need to control that load is so short because your foot's on the ground for such a small period of time.
It's a different type of challenge,
Yeah, for sure.
right? It's like if you took somebody who knew how to squat and then you challenged them by putting 500 pounds on their back, or you challenged them by jumping as fast as they could.
Yeah.
Right? Like one's being challenged by load, one's being challenged by speed, but both of those things would effectively destabilize the movement. So I think what I would say is that there's different ways that you could destabilize the movement.
Mm-hmm.
And in track, it's heavily skewed towards being destabilized from like a velocity standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to like you described if you were doing a pistol squat, much more in terms of the challenging via the external load.
Mm-hmm.
Not that there might be extra load in a pistol squat, but it's through more muscle force and resistance
Mm-hmm.
than it is movement velocity.
Mm-hmm. Just in my head with that, like a lot of the one of the things people talk about with unilateral stuff is that like certainly if you're managing movement options, but also like you have to stabilize in more planes, right? Like you're stabilizing the sagittal plane, but also the frontal plane and the transverse plane, and resisting forces in more directions like that. And that's one of the reasons that it carries over so well to sport in some people's heads. But if I'm thinking about when you're actually required to do those things, like stabilize in multiple planes, that's probably when you're doing things, you know, that require 2 feet on the ground. If you need that stability, you're going to get it wherever you can. So you're going to have 2 feet on the ground, which I don't know if that's a good argument, because when you have 2 feet on the ground in the weight room, you don't need to deal with forces in that many directions.
Yeah, you're
So
still dealing with it in one.
it's tricky. It's tricky. And then when you have 1 foot on the ground in sport, like you're running, there isn't a lot of side to side or front to back, or like there's rotation for sure, but it's like elastic, and like it keeps you centered almost inherently. Like your anatomy keeps you centered inherently almost.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if that's maybe a place for the pseudo unilateral. Because even if I'm thinking now, like when we talk about 2 feet on the ground and change of direction and things like that, it's probably not very common that you find it in like a true, you know, symmetrical bilateral stance. It's
No, it's
probably going to
not.
be bilateral in what we've been describing as like a pseudo unilateral
Yeah.
position, right? So, but again, there's still 2 feet on the ground. So I can see the benefit of, you know, trying to find a way to best bring all those pieces together,
Mm-hmm.
right? And where, yeah, maybe like you said, the bilateral movements give you more stability, and a lot of times in sport we're looking for stability.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I do wonder if maybe one's better than the other. I don't know. Like, would a split squat be better than a bilateral 2 foot squat? I don't know. Like, you have both feet on the ground. I don't know. I've never thought this is a new way of thinking about it for me. I've never thought about it in this light.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it. Well, they're tools. They're all tools, right? And yeah, it just you pick and choose when you use them. But I guess the more I'm thinking of, yeah, I don't, like maybe that in between might be the thing that needs to be in your program the most. You know, because you can do a lot of really good strength stuff with it. Um, and you do get a lot of like the stabilization effects from it, dealing with forces in different directions. It's not one leg, it's both legs. So I'm sure, like I haven't done a lot of like split stance jumping or anything like that. So I would imagine that you can produce sufficient speed with those kinds of jumps as well. It'd be
Definitely more
like,
than one leg.
yeah,
Like you could probably jump higher and faster with like a lunge jump, let's call it, than a
yeah,
single leg jump for sure.
yeah. And I mean, even if you want to talk about like the visual of it, like running, you do spend a lot of time in that like split pelvis position, and using those cross body slings and things like that. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, if we're trying to pick which one's the best, like we can't do that, obviously. But
No, I don't know. There's too many factors like to decide on.
yeah, but there's some interesting ways to use them anyway.
Yeah, and
Um,
new ways to think about using them. Like I said, we've had
mm,
some conversations and I've had some ideas and we've had some discussions that are taking into account things that at least I never considered before.
yeah, I didn't consider some of these things either. So
How much of it will I continue to consider? I don't know. But at the very least, it's good to have the conversation. And then maybe there's 4 or 5 things floating out there. And then one or two of those things ends up in your long term thinking with, oh, should I use a split squat? Should I use a regular squat? Should I use a single leg squat? It's another thing now to consider and go, oh, I didn't think about, you know, are they on 2 feet when they're changing direction or, any of these things that we've talked about. This is a new discussion point. So it gives you a new frame of reference to then decide how you program and pick certain
mhm.
things.
Well, yeah, and I mean, you think about it, you consider these things, and if you're considering more things, then probably you're going to have a little bit closer of an idea to what you're actually trying to accomplish, and then you try it, and then you learn, and then you decide for real if you like it or not. Um, yeah. Did you have any other ideas or anything that you thought about?
Well, I kind of combine them into one
Okay.
because I was thinking about the double, like a bilateral movement being more specific.
Hmm.
And then I was thinking about the transition from unilateral to bilateral
Right.
and just kind of brought those on the fly. I kind of brought the two of those together
Hmm.
because I figured they kind of meshed
Yeah,
well.
definitely.
And if I was to implement anything like that, I would bring them together. I wouldn't try to do that separately.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, for sure. That makes sense. Um, the only other thing I have on my sheet here was something um, that Cal Dietz mentioned as well. Um, was that from bilateral movements, he sees in his athlete a negative biofeedback. He's super into like measuring that kind of stuff. Um, and from what I can gather, that means like after a bilateral movement, the athletes are showing less range of motion like immediately after, or like their balance isn't as good immediately after. Um, like you'll have them stand on a force plate and like measure their sway,
Oh,
or
okay.
yeah, or have them like jump and then they're jumping like where they're landing is kind of all over the place versus if you were to do a unilateral exercise, um, their range of motion is not affected, their balance is not affected, they're just jumping up and down. Like there's movement of course, but it's closer to center. um, so what he does, because he also does both for sure, but if he has people doing a bilateral movement and he's expecting that negative biofeedback, then he gets them to march immediately afterwards. um, and that marching is reinforcing like he calls it the cross crawl pattern, I guess, or
Okay.
like walking crawl pattern, I don't know.
It's a
It's
cross
all,
sling movement,
yeah,
whatever.
exactly. And just a little bit of marching, like 4 to 6 steps or something like that, and apparently that just fixes it right away. um,
Probably because they're doing something unilateral that requires the balance.
well, exactly,
So it
exactly.
just gets those things firing again.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't know, just it's another element. It's not something that I've considered. I don't know how, like, I wouldn't have the ability to measure that stuff. I don't think like you could measure the range of motion maybe, but
Yeah, maybe. But Yeah, you need
But
the technology to do that.
I do kind of wonder too if it's like I imagine you can do bilateral movements in a way that don't have that impact, and I imagine you can do unilateral movements in a way that do have that impact. So
And does it have to be immediately right after? Right? Like maybe you're doing whatever bilateral movement, and like you said, we're usually using a mix of both.
yeah.
Maybe you're primarily doing bilateral movements that day, but if you end off with a little bit of unilateral work, is that enough to get rid of it?
Well, and I
Like,
don't think it's going to stay. Like I can't imagine that it's going to stay. Like if I mean if you never did unilateral stuff, like you trend yourself in this direction.
yeah,
But yeah, I don't know.
but that's what I wonder. Like, so do you have to do it after every single set, or like, does it matter as you're going through
Yeah, I
those
mean he
sets?
does.
And if you do some at the end of the workout or whatever, like,
Yeah, I mean for him, I think it matters because he does all this stuff in circuits, right? So he doesn't want this exercise to negatively impact that exercise, and
yeah, that's
so
true,
I don't know.
which would be different from some people then.
Yeah, yeah, but I don't know. I've thought about bringing that up on a couple. Like I thought about bringing that up in the potentiation thing, um, but yeah, I don't know. It fits here too. So
Yeah, I'm not a biofeedback expert, so I'd have
no,
to
it
look more
is.
into that.
Yeah, it is interesting, but yeah, I don't know. It works for him, and that's the thing. Is if it works for you, then you do it.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm never going to criticize something that fits the space that you're in, the people you're working with, the skills that you have as a coach. Done. If it
Yeah,
works and you're getting results, keep doing it.
absolutely, absolutely. Um, Likewise, if the music you listen to suits your needs and you like that, regardless of if we think it's smart or not, keep listening to that. Um, and like I discovered last week, some of the music that you think is really good, I think is terrible.
It is terrible, but it's so bad it's good.
And
So
that's where
bad
I'll
it's
disagree.
entertaining. It's
I think it's
entertaining.
I think it's beyond it's so bad that it's worse than the good bad stuff.
Then Jimmy Fallon was right. Do not listen.
Yeah.
It was
But
there
I
for a
think
reason.
that's right. But I think we both have stuff that's a little bit more acceptable this week.
Oh, definitely. I definitely do. Yeah, for sure.
What do you got?
I was listening to a lot of Parkway Drive.
Hmm.
Have you heard of them before or no?
I've heard of parkways and driveways.
Okay. They're like a metalcore band. They've been on
Okay.
they've had stuff on Octane, so you've maybe heard some stuff
Probably
by
then.
them.
Yeah.
Uh, they're from down under,
Nice.
so land of alligators and dingo babies, according to Kevin.
Nice.
Um, but yeah, like they're a little bit different than what I normally listen to from like a metal standpoint.
Hmm.
Um, but like it's catchy, it's good. Um, yeah, I don't really know how to describe it. It's like it sounds like metal probably to a lot of people, um, but it mixes like clean vocals and like the growling and all this other type of stuff, and it I don't want to say it has like a poppy element because it's not pop at all, but it has a little bit more of like a mainstream feel
Hmm.
with some elements of the music to appeal to a wider
Hmm.
audience.
Yeah.
But
Fair enough.
but yeah, they're good. I like them. They took a lot of flack for their last album, but I don't think it was as bad as people made it out to be. So they just changed the style. But hey, they got to explore. They got to do some things different. You never
Yeah.
know if you don't do it. So
That's right. You got to explore.
so yeah, that's what I was listening to this week.
Nice. Yeah. That sounds fun. Um, I have yet to check out Ghost. I almost did this week. I kind of bounced around, but like I started listening to a bunch of different stuff, and then I was like, that's not it. And then I changed. And then, that's not it. And then I changed. And I settled on Hollywood Undead this week. I went back to
That's
my
an
roots.
aggressive choice.
I'm a big fan of Hollywood Undead. That's yeah. After um like my first favorite band, well, okay. The first song I actually ever liked was by Guns N' Roses. Um so that was my favorite band for a little while.
Yeah.
And then I got introduced to Billy Talent and that was my favorite band. And then Disturbed after that and then Hollywood Undead after that was like my that's it. And yeah, that was for a while. And then I think now I probably don't have any favorite bands, but
You just got more and more aggressive with those selections.
I guess so. Yeah. I guess I did.
I wouldn't say heavier, but definitely more aggressive.
Yeah. But yeah, big fan of Hollywood Undead. Um, yeah. I don't know what people think about them. Their lead vocalist, I guess, changed between album 2 and 3, I think.
But they had multiple people singing anyway.
Oh yeah, like they're like a
Yeah.
full like rap rock kind of, but like the guy that does the chorus,
Oh, okay.
the guy
The
that does the
chorus guy.
chorus. Yeah, not he's not one of the rappers. He sings. Um, yeah, that guy. They kicked the one guy out of the band and then replaced him, and I think they're just as good, if not better. So it's solid. But yeah, big fan of them. Highly recommend their stuff. It's very crass, very lewd, very aggressive at
Yeah.
times.
I forgot about using the word lewd, but yeah, aggressive was the first thing that popped in my mind, but that's also an
Yeah,
accurate description.
it depends on the song. Like they've got songs that are very like violent, and they've got songs that are very like their party songs are really like don't listen to them around your parents. So, but it sounds nice. Don't listen to the lyrics, but it sounds nice, in my opinion.
That's so funny.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, good stuff. We learned a little bit about
We always
unilateral,
learn a little bit.
bilateral. Yeah, definitely. I think there's more stuff. Like you gotta just this one more than any of the other ones. I think you just gotta play with it
Yeah.
and see. Yeah. So, but yeah, if anybody has any thoughts that we didn't think about or interesting ideas, then let us know on Instagram, Speed Strength Show, Speed Strength Performance, or Braden Southern. Um, yeah. Other than that, then that was the Speed Strength Show. Thanks for coming along, world. Oops, almost forgot to say it.
I was like, is he going to say it? But he
Yeah.
did say it.
Yeah.
So we'll see you next time then.
Peace.